A young Roman of consular family by the name of Sextius was said to have kept beside his bed a small mirror of polished bronze and to have taken it up each evening before sleep. He would hold it close and ask himself, in the quiet of the lamp's wavering light, what fault he had committed that day, what passion he had failed to govern, what word he had let fall too quickly. And on certain nights, looking at the face that looked back at him, he would find that he did not recognize the man he saw there. It is this practice, this nightly accounting before a piece of polished metal, that Seneca describes in the third book of his treatise on anger. And it is to this practice that we shall return, because the question Seneca asks of us is not whether anger is permissible, nor whether it is useful, but whether the man who is angry has any clear sight of himself at all. The Stoic answer is severe. The angry man, Seneca tells us, is blind, and the first work of philosophy is to give him back his eyes. Let us reflect then on what Seneca meant when he said that to know oneself is the only sufficient defense against rage, and why he believed that this knowledge could not be acquired in a single act of resolve, but must be gathered, evening by evening, in a long and patient labor. We are told by Seneca in the opening lines of De Ira that he writes at the request of his brother Novatus, who had asked him how anger might be soothed. Seneca's answer is not what his brother expected. He does not propose to soothe anger. He proposes to abolish it. No plague has cost the human race more dear, he writes. You will see slaughterings and poisonings, the sordid mutual exchanges of criminals, the destruction of cities, the ruin of whole nations. The Stoic position is not that anger is sometimes excessive, occasionally misdirected, frequently regrettable. The Stoic position is that anger is, in its essence, a sickness of the rational soul, and that no quantity of it, however small, however briefly indulged, is compatible with the life of reason. This is a hard saying. Aristotle had said something gentler. He had said that the man who is not angry at the right things, in the right way, at the right time, is a fool, and that proper anger, well-tempered and proportionate, is a sign of moral seriousness. Seneca knows this argument. He answers it directly and at length. The Aristotelian position, he says, assumes that anger can be measured out like wine, and that the rational man may take a small cup and stop. But anger is not wine. Anger is a fire, and the fire does not consult the man who lit it. Once admitted into the soul, it consumes whatever it touches, and the man who believed himself to be its master discovers, too late, that he was only its kindling. What then is anger in Seneca's account? He defines it, following the older Stoics, as a movement of the soul, which assents to the appearance of an injury and judges that vengeance is owed. Each part of this definition matters. There is first the appearance. Something happens and we perceive it as a slight, a wound, an injustice. There is second the assent. We agree inwardly that the appearance is correct. There is third the judgment of vengeance. We conclude that something must be done in return. Anger lives in the assent and the judgment. It does not live in the first appearance, for the appearance comes upon us without our consent. We cannot prevent the first sting, but we can refuse to call it what anger calls it. We can withhold the assent. And here, Seneca introduces the principle to which our episode is given. The withholding of assent, he says, is impossible for the man who does not know himself. For the man who does not know himself confuses every appearance with reality. He believes that because he feels wronged, he has been wronged. He believes that because he feels diminished, he has been diminished. He believes that because the blood has risen to his face and the heat has gathered in his chest, the cause of these motions must lie outside him, in the person or the circumstance that occasioned them. He does not see that the motions are his own, that they arise within him according to laws he has never studied, and that the foreign hand he wishes to strike is merely the trigger of a mechanism he himself has built and never inspected. To know oneself, then, is to see this mechanism. To see the mechanism is to be able, at last, to interrupt it. This is the principle. Now, to understand why Seneca wrote so urgently on this subject and why his treatise on anger reads in places like a man arguing with himself, we must consider the circumstances of his life. Lucius Annaeus Seneca was born in Corduba, in the Roman province of Hispania, around the year 4 before the Common Era, into a family of provincial wealth and rhetorical distinction. His father, Seneca the Elder, was a teacher of declamation, and the household in which the young Seneca grew was a household in which words were taken seriously, weighed, contested, refined. He was sent to Rome as a child to be educated, and there he studied philosophy under teachers of the Sextian school, the same school that had produced the man with the mirror, Quintus Sextius the Younger, and under Attalus the Stoic, whose lectures he remembered for the rest of his life. He was a sickly young man. He suffered, by his own account, from a long and wearing illness of the lungs, an affliction so persistent and so depleting that he considered more than once ending his own life, and refrained, he tells us, only out of regard for his father, who could not have borne the loss. He went to Egypt to recover, lived for years in the household of an aunt whose husband governed the province, and returned to Rome at last in his early 30s, ready, as he thought, to enter public life. What followed was not a smooth ascent. He rose under Caligula and was nearly executed by him, saved, according to one account, only because a woman of the court told the emperor that Seneca was already so ill he would soon die anyway. He survived Caligula. He was exiled by Claudius on a charge of adultery with the emperor's niece, the truth of which was never established, and he spent 8 years on the island of Corsica, where he wrote, among other works, a consolation to his mother and a treatise on the brevity of life. He was recalled by Agrippina, the new empress, to serve as tutor to her son, a boy of 12, whose name was Nero. And here is where the matter of anger becomes, for Seneca, no longer academic. For Nero, as is well known, became one of the most dangerous men in Roman history, and Seneca, his teacher, his counselor, his speechwriter, his moderating presence, lived for many years in the immediate vicinity of an imperial temper that grew, year by year, more capricious and more lethal. Seneca was rich by the end. He was rich because Nero made him rich, and he served Nero through years in which the young emperor murdered his stepbrother, murdered his mother, and turned, at last, against his teacher as well. We are not here to litigate Seneca's compromises. He made them. He grew wealthy in the service of a tyrant. He wrote throughout philosophical letters and treatises which argued that wealth was indifferent, that power was indifferent, that the only good was virtue, and the contradiction between his life and his writing is the great problem of his biography. He saw it himself. He wrote about it. "I am not a wise man," he says in one of the letters, "and I shall not be one. Demand of me, not that I should equal the best, but that I should be better than the bad." It is from within this life, then, this life lived in the antechamber of a man whose anger could end a senator's existence with a nod, that Seneca writes his treatise on rage. He has watched anger. He has watched it in the court of Caligula. He has watched it more nearly and more dangerously in the eyes of Nero. He has watched what anger does to a face, to a voice, to a household, to an empire, and he has watched it also in himself, because Seneca was not a placid man. He was ambitious. He was easily wounded by criticism. He had enemies, and he knew he had them, and he knew that the desire to strike back, to humiliate, to settle accounts, was a fire he had to bank in his own chest before he could presume to write of it in any other man's. This is the circumstance of the principle. Seneca did not derive his teaching on anger from contemplation in a garden. He derived it from a court in which rage was an instrument of state, in which the inability of one man to govern his temper had cost the lives of many, and in which the philosopher who survived was the philosopher who had learned by long practice to see the first stirrings of fury in himself and to refuse them his assent. How then did the principle function in Seneca's actual life? Let us look at the practices he records and the texts in which he records them, and let us be specific, because the danger in writing of Stoicism is that it dissolves into abstraction, and Seneca, above all Stoics, was a man of method, of concrete daily exercise, of the small repeated act that, over years, becomes a character. The central practice he describes, and the one to which our cold open returned us, is the evening examination. He attributes it explicitly to Sextius. When the light has been removed from sight, Seneca writes in the third book of De Ira, "And my wife, long aware of my habit, has fallen silent, I examine my entire day and go back over what I have done and said, hiding nothing from myself, passing nothing by. For why should I fear any of my mistakes when I am able to say, 'See that you do not do that again, this time I forgive you'? In that argument, you spoke too aggressively. Do not after this engage with ignorant people. They do not want to learn, and have never learned." He goes on in this passage to enumerate his own faults of the day. He has been too sharp with a slow servant. He has spoken in a way that was meant to wound, and not merely to inform. He has allowed himself to be drawn into a debate with a man whose mind was already closed, and has come away from it irritated and dissatisfied, as he should have known he would. Notice the tone. It is not the tone of the penitent. Seneca is not flagellating himself. He is taking inventory. He is, as he says, his own judge, and he is a fair judge, neither cruel nor lenient. He notes the fault, he records the cause, he prescribes the remedy, and then he sleeps. This is the mirror. Sextius held a literal one. Seneca holds a mirror of words, a mirror of memory, and he holds it nightly. The point of the mirror is not shame. The point of the mirror is knowledge. The man who has watched himself every evening for 10 years knows things about himself that no other practice could have taught him. He knows the hour of the day at which his patience is shortest. He knows the kind of person whose mannerisms most reliably provoke him. He knows the topics on which his pride is thinnest and most easily wounded. He has mapped, in long and patient study, the territory of his own anger, and he is therefore not surprised when the anger comes, He has met it before. He knows its approaches. And this knowledge, Seneca insists, is the only defense that works. Resolutions do not work. The man who resolves not to be angry without knowing himself is like a man who resolves not to be ambushed without having studied the ground. The ambush comes from the direction he did not foresee, and his resolution is broken before he has even understood that the battle has begun. In a second passage of De Ira, Seneca describes another practice, which we may call the pause. The greatest remedy for anger, he writes, is delay. When you feel the first motion of rage, do nothing. Do not speak. Do not act. Do not even compose, in your own mind, the speech you intend to deliver. Wait. The first motion of anger is, in Stoic terms, what is sometimes called a pre-passion, a movement of the body which has not yet received the assent of the rational soul. If you wait, the pre-passion may pass without ever becoming a passion proper. If you act, you have given it your assent, and you are now its servant. Seneca records that he tried, in his own life, to make this pause a habit. When a letter arrived that displeased him, he would not answer it that day. When a servant had erred, he would not punish immediately. When a friend had spoken in a way that wounded him, he would say nothing in the moment and would address the matter, if at all, the following morning. The mirror at night and the pause during the day were the two halves of a single discipline, the daylight half and the lamplit half of a man's long study of himself. There is a third practice, and it is perhaps the most demanding. Seneca calls it the rehearsal of injuries. The wise man, he says, ought to prepare himself each morning for the wrongs he will encounter during the day. He will be insulted. He will be cheated. He will be ignored. He will be spoken of unjustly behind his back. He will find that men who owed him gratitude have forgotten him, and that men he had counted as friends have proven themselves indifferent. None of this should astonish him. All of it is the ordinary commerce of human life, and the philosopher who is astonished by it has not been paying attention. To rehearse these injuries in advance, in the calm of the morning, is to deprive them of their power to surprise. Anger feeds on surprise. A wound that is expected is half healed before it is received. Seneca was, by all accounts, including his own, only partially successful in these practices. He admits in several letters that he has been provoked, that he has spoken too sharply, that he has carried grievances longer than a Stoic ought. He does not present himself as the sage. He presents himself as the student, a man making progress, a man who has not yet arrived, and this honesty is perhaps the most useful thing about him. The reader of the Meditations may sometimes feel that Marcus is too good for him, that the emperor's serenity is a thing for emperors and not for ordinary men. The reader of Seneca's letters does not feel this. The reader feels that he is in the company of a man who struggles, who sometimes fails, who has nevertheless decided that the struggle is worth continuing, and who returns each evening to his mirror. Let us now consider what Seneca is actually teaching the listener. The principle, plainly stated, is this: anger is not caused by the things that anger us. Anger is caused by our judgments about those things, and our judgments are the product of habits of mind that we have, for the most part, never examined. The only defense against anger is the examination of those habits. The only place where the examination can be conducted is in oneself. The only time at which the examination is reliably possible is in the quiet of solitude, removed from the immediate occasions of provocation. The mirror, the pause, the morning rehearsal, the nightly accounting. These are the instruments by which the examination is carried out. What Seneca is not teaching is that you should suppress your anger, swallow it, conceal it, perform a calmness you do not feel. He has no interest in performance. The performance of calm by a man inwardly raging is, in his view, simply a more dangerous form of the disease because it goes undiagnosed. He is not telling you to be patient. He is telling you to be accurate. He is telling you that when you feel anger rising, the first work is not to hide it, but to look at it, to ask where it is coming from, to ask whether the judgment beneath it is one you would defend in the cold light of evening, and to ask whether the man on the receiving end of your fury has actually done what you, in your heat, are accusing him of having done. In nearly every case, Seneca thinks, the answer is no, or the answer is yes, but the injury is smaller than your anger has made it, or the answer is yes, and the injury is real, but the wrongdoer is to be pitied rather than struck, because no one does wrong willingly, and the man who has injured you is acting out of an ignorance you yourself, in some other matter, also share. This last point deserves a moment. It is one of the most distinctive notes in Seneca's treatment. The angry man, he says, imagines that the person who has wronged him is fundamentally different from himself, more vicious, more corrupt, more unworthy. The philosopher who has examined himself knows better. He knows that he too has done wrong, that he too has acted from motives he would not have wished to confess, that he too has been the occasion of another man's anger and has not always deserved the forgiveness he received. The mirror does not flatter. The man who has truly looked at himself cannot easily believe in his own innocence, and the man who cannot easily believe in his own innocence cannot easily believe in the unique guilt of another. Anger requires a certain self-righteousness. Self-knowledge, honestly pursued, dissolves the self-righteousness, and the anger goes with it. This is the structural lesson. Self-knowledge is not, for Seneca, a project of self-improvement in the modern sense. It is not the accumulation of insights about one's personality, the discovery of one's strengths, the cultivation of one's authentic voice. It is something more austere. It is the patient and uncomfortable accounting, evening by evening, of the gap between the man one believes oneself to be and the man one actually is. It is the discipline of seeing, again and again, that one is not yet wise, not yet just, not yet free of the petty motions of ego and resentment, and of returning nevertheless to the work. The mirror, in Seneca's hands, is not a flattering object. It is not the mirror of self-affirmation. It is the mirror of self-correction, and it is held up not because the man looking into it is satisfied with what he sees, but because he understands that the only path to becoming a better man passes through the unflinching observation of the man he currently is. There is no shortcut. There is no resolution that bypasses the examination. The angry man who has not examined himself will be angry again tomorrow, and the day after, and for the rest of his life, and at the end of his life, he will not have understood why. Seneca's quarrel with anger, then, is not moralistic. It is, in a sense, diagnostic. He sees anger as a symptom, and the disease is ignorance, ignorance of oneself most of all. To treat the symptom without treating the disease is futile. To treat the disease is the work of years, and the work has no completion, only continuation. The wise man, Seneca says elsewhere, is not the man who has finished the work. The wise man is the man who knows that the work is never finished, and who continues it anyway. There is, finally, a political dimension to this teaching, and we should not pass over it, because Seneca did not. He wrote De Ira in a Rome where the anger of powerful men determined the fate of unpowerful ones, and he wrote it, in part, as a kind of indirect instruction to his pupil. The treatise contains passages that can only be read as warnings to a young man with the power of life and death, passages on the kings and tyrants who have destroyed themselves through rage, on the impossibility of governing others if one cannot govern oneself, on the rapid decay of a soul that indulges its first impulses without examination. Whether Nero read these passages and what he made of them, if he did, we do not know. We know how the story ended. Seneca was ordered in the year 65 to take his own life on the suspicion of involvement in a conspiracy. He obeyed. Tacitus tells us that he died slowly, his veins opened, dictating to his secretaries to the last. Whether his final words concerned anger or its absence has not been recorded. The mirror that Sextius kept beside his bed and that Seneca took up after him is a small object. It is older than philosophy. The injunction to know oneself was carved at Delphi long before any Stoic wrote a treatise, and the practice of nightly self-examination predates Seneca by centuries and has outlived him by 20 more. There is nothing novel in what he teaches. There is only the patient insistence that the teaching, however old, however familiar, is still untried by most of those who have heard it. You have heard it now. The question is not whether you will agree with Seneca that anger is, in its essence, a sickness, nor whether you will adopt his particular practices in their particular forms. The question, perhaps, is smaller and more immediate. When you were last angry, can you remember the moment at which the appearance of injury became your assent to that appearance? Can you remember the judgment you made in that moment about the person or the circumstance that had provoked you? Can you remember whether the judgment was true? If you cannot remember, it may be that the moment passed without your having seen it, and this is the condition Seneca calls blindness. The mirror is the cure for that blindness, and the mirror, in its essential form, is nothing more than the willingness to look. You do not need bronze. You need only a quiet quarter of an hour at the end of the day, in which you ask of yourself what you have done, and what you have said, and where, in the long sequence of small motions that made up your hours, you yielded to a passion you had not first examined. You may find, if you do this for a time, that you become quieter, not because you have suppressed anything, but because you have understood things you did not before understand. The understanding is the work. The quietness, if it comes, is only the sign that the work has begun. It is thus the wise man knows that the labor of the philosopher is not the conquest of the world, but the slow recovery of his own sight. Seneca, who spent his life in the noise of an imperial court, returned each evening, we are told, to a small room, a single lamp, and a mind willing to be examined. We do not know whether he became, in the end, the man he wished to be. We know that he kept trying. We know that the trying, in his account, is what philosophy is. Carry the question with you if you will, and let it be enough for tonight.